horizontal aspect of cause and effect through time and the laws of nature, obviously, if you're looking at it from that frame of reference, everything is deterministic. How can you violate cause and effect? And so libertarian free will, however that's defined, either philosophically or theologically, or there's a lot of versions of that.
And do
Um,
you think that free will makes some sort of presumption that something violates uh, causality?
well, there's a lot of ways to define free will. Not everyone agrees on how you define free will. I think it's a non-argument. I think whether you believe whether you're a strict determinist or some kind of a libertarian or a theological or soulist um, free will person, it's all deterministic. Even the libertarian theological free will people, the real debates between whether
Well, I don't
it
I don't see what the argument is for that. Let's just like presume that free will is the ability to choose otherwise, right? Or
yeah. So so
let's
either
just say
way,
that someone, hold on. Let's just say that someone holds to this view where an agent has the ability to make a choice vis-a-vis um, the agent being themselves the cause of their own action, right? Do you think that that's somehow incompatible with the view that you laid out of causality?
well, I wasn't finished laying it out. So um, I'm saying that if you look at the horizontal axis of cause and effect through time, then scientifically nothing violates the laws of nature. So everything is deterministic. However, there's another axis, 90 degrees, of the vertical axis of the society in with which we live. And that's where the question of free will is important, because we want to hold individual agents accountable morally for their actions. And, on the horizontal axis, it doesn't matter. I mean, what happens, happens, and morality is a meaningless question. Morality and accountability under free will only makes sense within the structure of the society in which we live. And in that perspective, then I would say, yes, we do have free will. It's a deterministic illusion, but it's a very useful and beautiful illusion that gives meaning to our lives as social animals. Your individual life that you live day to day, moment to moment, is purely deterministic, no question. But your social life and this other axis, this other point of view, uh, free will emerges as an emergent property in the collection of all of us. I wrote a whole book about it. It's called Free Will Explained, and not that I'm the world's greatest expert on it, but boy,
Okay,
I
that
read, I
that's
read.
fine and that's fine and dandy, but like the couple of issues there. Number one, you're saying that you're deriving hard determinism in virtue of the fact that there's this presumption that you've made for no reason that somehow the laws of physics appear to be complete and everything is going to be um, at least in appearance nomologically necessary. I don't see what the argument is for that. And second of all, even if we like presume that even if we presume that the laws of nature cannot be violated, do you think that if I hold to free will of some kind, I'm going to have to posit that the laws of nature can be violated?
No, no, and I just said that. I
Okay,
think
so
free
what's
will is an illusion.
okay, that's fine. I don't really care. I don't see how that's like relevant to my point. My point is that you wanted to make the argument that um, the reason why you hold to determinism is because you have this sort of, I mean, you didn't give like an inference, but you have this sort of like intuition that the laws of physics appear to be complete and fixed. And if those things are true, then hard determinism must be the case. But that's only a conclusion that someone who holds to free will might accept if and only if they think that in order to hold to free will, you must make this presumption that the laws of nature can be violated. But why would they have any reason to believe that?
Well, I'm agreeing with you. I don't think it matters. I think whether the laws of nature as we know them are viable or not. Ultimately, even under a libertarian concept of free will, even that is deterministic by some other, let's say, supra or
No,
supernatural laws.
you're not
Everything is
saying that.
well, that's what I'm
I'm not
saying.
saying that. Determinism is the thesis that um, all events are going to be, uh, how do I say this? All events are going to be necessitated by antecedent conditions, right? If you
Yeah.
don't hold to that view, then you're going to hold to the negation of that and say that it's not the case that all events are necessitated by antecedent conditions. But what I want from you is what exactly would entail from this view that you have that you would arrive to such a conclusion that all events are necessitated by antecedent conditions. How do you demonstrate that?
Well, I think that's just pure logic. I think one event, if you call it an event, you're saying that it was caused. If you're calling it an event, so um, I don't think you're
Do you
grasping my
think there
point.
do you think that there could be events which weren't caused by anything prior?
Um, no, but the cause could be random. But you're
What?
still not grasping my point here.
Well,
You,
I
you,
don't. I mean, I don't see how that. I'm just simply asking. I'm just simply wanting to investigate your thought process here, right? So
what,
you said it was in virtue of pure logic, right? Then I asked you how you would derive that entailment, and then you brought up something like, well, presumably if it's going to be an event, it's that's going to like presuppose that there's a cause that's prior, right, to that event somehow. But why would why would anyone have to presume that? Why can't the event itself be like some brute contingency? It's going to be a brute fact that could be otherwise, and obviously it has no explanation. It's not explained by any prior event, right? And I think a lot of libertarians would hold to brute contingency, right? For example,
well, then brute contingency is itself a deterministic cause. Even if you have true libertarianism, even if it's not, the real debate is not between determinism and free will. The real debate is between natural determinism and supernatural or
I
libertarian
don't know
determinism. There's
why.
still determinism. Either way you look at it,
Well, that's
inside or
just
outside
because,
of nature,
well,
inside or
you
outside of causality,
again,
you're still looking at some form of determinism. Even if there's a God or a spirit or a soul, that was determined by something. It didn't just, otherwise we wouldn't be able to define our words and we wouldn't
again,
be
so
able to just
you're
have a meaningful
so
conversation.
this is what's happened so far. You haven't provided an argument for anyone here for why determinism is the case. You keep presuming that determinism is only going to be the case. It just happens to be that the dichotomy happens to be between naturalists and supernaturalists. I don't really care how like the natural versus supernatural distinction is relevant here. And second, you said that if it would be a brute contingent fact, it would still have to be deterministic. Well, I'm trying to figure out how, because it seems possible that a libertarian can just posit um, that no antecedent condition entails an agent's action, but nevertheless they could choose otherwise, right? And that event in which they choose otherwise isn't necessitated by antecedent conditions. They're denying what you're already affirming. So, what would be your response, right?
The agent that is making that decision is a biological agent with a functioning brain based upon brain cells and based upon physical causes. It's the agent that's making that is a brain, and that brain has brain cells. That brain has atoms and molecules that came through evolution or through other ways. And so that
The
is
libertarian
all
can
of that
agree
is
with
that
that.
all of that is contingent upon physicality, and all of that physicality, as we know, follows the laws of nature. Therefore even some supposedly random thought in your mind is happening in a functioning brain of physical matter and electrical impulses and chemical impulses. Those things are happening according to the laws of nature. Unless you have a totally different idea or definition of what determinism itself means, I don't see how you
Just
can
seems
escape
like
that
you
basic
have
definition.
It just seems like you have a misunderstanding of what determinism means. Look, do you think that a libertarian, right, has to disagree with all of what you just said, invoking those things as being like chemical impulses in the brain? A libertarian can agree with you. It's just that they would just argue that the event itself isn't necessitated by those antecedent conditions, right? We could we could presume that all of that is material. We could presume that all of that is somehow going to be nomological. How is that going to be material to my point?
Because how do you know that? What we do know is what we argue from. You can
So
hypothesize all you like.
how
You can say
do you
there's a
respond to
soul.
me with a
You can say
question?
you can say there's a spirit. You can say there's a soul. You can say there's ghosts. You can say there's gods. That's a hypothesis. That's a belief, and you're welcome to it. But as far as we know, according to the laws of nature, any event, especially an event that occurs within a biological organism, has antecedent causes. You can propose something otherwise, but you can't
Yeah,
demonstrate
you
that.
didn't give an argument for that. I simply
I don't need to give an
provided the
argument.
example. I simply, oh, so you don't have an argument. Is that what you're admitting?
What I'm saying is that you don't need to give an argument for a definition. Otherwise,
Wait.
there's no argument
Oh,
for
so
libertarianism either.
you're just saying that if something, if it, okay, so this is what you're saying. If something is an event, right, that occurs in the natural world, you're just going to say it's part of your concept that that thing had to be necessitated by antecedent conditions.
Which is no worse than saying the opposite, that a libertarian would say that has a belief in it. It's no worse than that. At least my
Okay,
position is
so
backed up
then this
by
conversation
observation.
isn't interesting anymore because you just want to presume that it's an analytic truth, and I don't share your concept of what determinism is.
Well, then
So I don't
I
think this
think
conversation is interesting.
well, I think we've at least agreed that there can be disagreement here. I mean,
Just ask them what's the
can you make a
concept.
case? Can somebody make a case for libertarian free will other than just a positive?
To be fair, sir, even if we presume that, I mean, seemingly to me, I mean, it doesn't seem logically impossible for there to be the type of event that I described, where an agent is the cause of their own action, and that isn't necessitated by any prior set of antecedent conditions like nomological laws, right? And if that seems to be logically possible, right, why should I grant you that's logically necessary somehow or conceptually necessary that those things are determined by antecedent conditions?
I happen to agree that agents are personally responsible for actions which we
Okay, so
consider in a
then it's
society that
not so then it's
are
not
you in the
conceptually
habit,
necessary.
excuse me, Puda, are you in the habit of interrupting before a person has finished their concepts here? So
This is a back and forth. So then
yes, I know it is.
you agree it's not conceptually necessary.
What I started off saying at the beginning, which I never got to get around to, is that it depends on your frame of reference. You understand that there can be a horizontal frame of reference of cause and effect, one thing happening after it, like melody. One note follows the next one follows the next, until the end, if there is an end. But I don't know if you grasp the fact that you can rotate that axis and look at things not horizontally but vertically, and within that frame of reference, I can agree with you 100% that individual agents are morally responsible, as if, whether or not that's true, as if they were the ultimate or at least the proximate cause of their actions. I can agree with that.
Look,
So it depends what frame of
it's
reference
of no
you're looking
interest to
at.
me. If it's of no interest to me for you to bring up those claims that you don't have justification for. So I'm not here for you to waste my time.
And
What
I'm
I'm
supposed to
interested in
care what's interesting to
what I'm
you.
interested in is how you respond to my argument because I just showed you that it's conceptually possible for there to be a state of affairs where an agent is the cause of their own action, but nevertheless that event wasn't necessitated by any sort of like external conditions to the agent, right? It wasn't necessitated by the laws of nature, it wasn't necessitated by anything that you're talking about, right? So if it's conceptually possible, right, then it can't be the case that what you're saying is correct when you say it's conceptually necessary for there to be hard determinism in the natural world, right?
Well, I don't know if that's conceptually possible. What I'm agreeing is that within the social structure we
What's
live
the
in,
what's the contradiction in there being
I don't know if
agent-based
there's a
causation?
I don't know if there's a contradiction. I don't know if it's even conceptually possible. It seems like you're making an ontological argument rather than a scientific or logical
What?
argument here.
I'm making look, I'm making a very simple conceptual point, right? You wanted to say that somehow it follows from your concept, right? How you invoke the sense of that term, that would just follow that all events are necessitated by the laws of nature, right? Then I asked you, well, you have this scenario where the agent is the cause of their own action, right? And nevertheless, that action was not going to be produced by any set of nomological laws constraining the agent, right? And if that's conceptually possible, then it would just follow that your view is not conceptually necessary, right?
Well, I don't think it's conceptually possible. That's our difference.
Okay, how is it not conceptually possible?
Because science is driven by observation. Science has hypotheses, of course, they can be true or false, but it's driven by observation. And what we observe, which has led us to the laws of nature that we have right now, what we observe is that physical events have physical causes. That's what we observe.
Sorry, but look,
That's what we observe. I'm sorry, Puda.
when I ask you why it's conceptually necessary, and you bring me stuff that's just going to count as some sort of like a posteriori reason, you're not giving me exactly what is going to be entailed by what's going to be entailed by your sense, your use of the sense of the term, right, in such a way that would rule out all instances logically for there to be like an event that's caused by an agent, right? So you bringing up some sort of like a posteriori reason here isn't going to work,
But I
right?
agree
You
with
say
you
it's
that I
conceptually necessary.
agree with you that events are caused by agents.
When did I ever look? Look, when you appeal to something that is conceptually necessary, I'm just saying that it wouldn't work, it wouldn't help your case if you brought in something that was some a posteriori reason, right? Because it could still be the case that you're correct, but nevertheless, it's logically or conceptually possible for there to be agent-based causation. So um, your rebuttal to me was irrelevant, right? Because even all that you said right now can be true, right, and still consistent with what I'm saying, that those things are conceptually possible.
Well, even if you're right about that, you still have to make a case. You can hypothesize and think about anything
I'm saying
that
that you're
you
making
imagine.
the
You
wrong
still have to
case.
make a case for your hypothesis.
Yeah, I'm saying that you're making the wrong case.
I'm not making a case. I'm asking you if you have a case
Look, I asked
for
you
your.
why it would be. You said that you disagreed that it would be conceptually possible, right? So I want you to derive it a priori that it's going to be the case necessarily that all events are necessitated by the laws of nature,
Well,
such
to
that they
be
would rule out the view that I'm proposing.
well to be truly scientific, we have to stick with observation. We can hypothesize all we want. At the end of the
Did
day,
I?
we have to go with observation. And what we observe in the natural world is that natural events are preceded by natural causes. If you have some other framework that
Which
fits
is
with what you think
consistent,
is,
which is logically consistent with the view that I gave. So how's that a response? All of what you said could be true, and nevertheless, it would be logically possible for there to be agent-based causation. Again, this is just something immaterial.
well, on the one hand, talking ontologically, we can agree that at least theoretically, anything and everything could be logically possible. But on the other hand, if we are limiting ourselves to the principles of science, which depend on observation, then by that frame of reference and by that criterion, I'm not saying that's necessarily the only one, but if we're going to be scientific, then it is not logically
Did
possible.
I
It's not
say
even
anything
logically
about me
coherent.
wanting to be scientific?
Well, no,
Why
but
why
I
do you
do.
keep bringing that up? I never said anything about like wanting to be scientific. I'm simply asking what is the a priori account that would establish that those things are conceptually necessary? I'm not asking you for any set of like a posteriori reasons. Who cares?
Well, I
So,
guess
I
who
mean,
cares about any of this? Really, we're talking in circles here. So who cares? I mean,
well,
Look, do you know? Do
Dan,
you
can I
know?
let,
can I try
Do
to
you know
I would
offer
what
like
it
to
like a
ask.
means?
concrete? Can I try to offer a concrete example, right? Like, so.
No. So let me ask you a very simple question, right? If I say to you that X is conceptually necessary, right, and you bring up scientific evidence to say that Y is in support of X being conceptually necessary, do you think scientific evidence here is going to work in order to establish what you're trying to get at when you say that those things are conceptually necessary?
Well, I guess I'm not really following this. I'm sticking with the observations
Well, you're
of
look,
science. So
it, it's fine to be conceptually impoverished. It's fine for you to not understand what I'm saying, but that still isn't like a rebuttal to what I'm saying. What I'm saying
but
is
it's
that you
possible.
failed. You made a claim that it wouldn't be conceptually possible for there to be a state of affairs where an agent is the cause of their own action, right? When pressed to give some sort of account, you deferred to scientific evidence which is namely consistent with those state of affairs being logically possible. So how is it even a relevant objection to my point? So you
But I just
failed to
agree. I just
justify
agreed with you. I don't even know what your name is, but I
you
just agreed with you that it
Timber.
is
That's my name,
possible.
Timber.
It is possible for an agent to be responsible for their own action, to
Yeah,
be
so look,
considered responsible. I agree with that.
So look,
In
this is
within,
that you're now avoiding my fundamental point. My point is that you made a claim, right? You failed to justify, right, your claim by bringing up something irrelevant or immaterial that satisfies the conceptual necessity of there being hard determinism in the natural world. So now you have to defer to something else.
I'm sorry, but you're obfuscating here. The whole idea of
What's the
determinism,
obfuscation?
because determinism is a scientific concept, and science is based on observation, and science observes that every event is preceded by a previous cause. That's the framework there. If you want to
Wait,
argue
why
about
why
something
do I have
spooky,
to accept why do I have to accept the causal principle exactly?
you don't have to, but science does.
What? Who
Science
cares?
does.
I'm not asking you about science. I'm asking you about me, your interlocutor in this dialectical context. What do you think would persuade me of your view in a way where I would be convinced that all events are necessitated by antecedent conditions,
Well, then
namely
I would ask you.
nomological ones?
Well, then I would ask you, do you agree with the methodology of science and observation, or don't you?
Or can you answer my question?
I have a question on the table.
No. But you answer my question. You haven't answered any single one of my
I,
questions, right? I'm
I,
asking you, what do you think would persuade me into thinking that
it's time for dinner.
it isn't, look, that it isn't conceptually possible? Okay, run off.